And we'll get started.
Okay.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Mina Jane. I'm the director of the Ashland Public Library in Massachusetts, and I'm super excited to be here with Camille Di Maio. Is it Di Maio or Di Maio?
DeMaio, you got it right.
Oh, excellent. That doesn't always happen. I should have asked before we started. Who's going to be talking about historical fiction and her journey in writing and all of the wonderful things that she does because she's amazing. And you'll find out in just a minute about all about her. So before we get started, I want to say thanks to the Friends of the Ashland Public Library for supporting all of our programs. We can't do this stuff without them. I'd also like to thank Camille for letting us share this program with other libraries because if anybody knows me, they know I'm going to say when libraries work together, we make magic. And obviously, we made this magical program happen tonight. So you can buy signed books by Camille from my favorite indie bookstore, Aesop's Fable. I will put a link to that in the recap email. I will send it out to everybody after the program. And if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, which is a button at the bottom of your screen. You can chatter with each other in the chat. I love to see that, but I can't always find all of the questions there. So make sure you put your questions in the Q&A. So I have a funny story about Camille. I reached out to her about something totally different. We're doing a historical fiction swag bag auction in October, and she immediately responded and was like, "Yes, absolutely, anything for libraries." I was like, "I love her," and then we started talking about doing this program, and she, of course, she was just like, "Yes, absolutely, anything for libraries." And then I started reading her bio, and I was like, "What an interesting person! Like she's traveled, she met Mother Teresa, Pope John Paul II, and Paul McCartney, which I'll have to ask her which was her favorite. And apparently, she's willing to do just about anything that does not involve heights, roller skates, or anything illegal. I'm really glad that you included that illegal thing at the end there.
I'm kind of a good girl.
Just an adventure nut. I love it. Thank you, Camille, for being here and just being so wonderful to this library and to all libraries.
Oh, yes, thank you so much for having me. I definitely became a lover of books from my school library, and so that's just definitely a love affair that has lasted to this day.
Awesome. Like I was telling Camille before we started that I used to be an elementary school librarian. So I love the idea that really started out as, because of your libraries in school, that is, like made you a library kid.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I just the sad part of it is I was bullied on the playground, and so the library was my respite, and I just tore through so much of what we had. And
Mhm.
yeah, so the library saved me, authors saved me. I wanted to be a part of that someday and just help people with the escapism the same way I feel like I received it. So I kind of knew early on that this would be part of my dynamic someday.
That is really interesting because I was super shy when I was a kid, and for me, books kept me sane really because I couldn't interact with people, but I never wanted to be a writer. So like, what drew you to being a writer? Like you said, the authors, wanting to give back. But even at that young age, what were you thinking?
I remember really distinctly being in my school library and going through all the Nancy Drews specifically. I went through Trixie Belden, Bobbsey Twins, Nancy Drew. I literally, so this was a Catholic grade school in Denver, and the nun, Sister Charles Marie, called my parents in concerned that I had a criminal future because all I read was detective books. And I thought, why didn't she think I might have a detective future? It was it was so odd. But I remember the Nancy Drew books specifically just drawing me in so much, and I was so grateful to Carolyn Keene for being a writer who would just help me with that escapism. And that just attracted me to doing the same thing someday. And then this may not be a surprise to some of your watchers here, but for those, I'm sorry if I'm about to break your heart, but I was watching Jeopardy a few years ago and discovered in a Jeopardy question that Carolyn Keene was not a real person. And she was, in fact, a name of a conglomerate of people writing Nancy Drew. And I am really, really glad that I didn't know that when I started writing, because literally she was my role model. This idea of this Carolyn Keene was my role model. And I wonder if I had known that before I started writing, I wonder if it kind of would have like killed the spirit for me. But by the time I found out, I think I had 5 or 6 books out already. So I did the child in me was a little brokenhearted, but but that is my story there. But no, basically it was just authors kind of rescuing me made me want to rescue others in
Hmm.
that way. And I saw literature as being able to pull you out of your circumstances into something else. And then as I've just become much more of a reader, I realize how empathetic it makes you, how it helps you learn other cultures or other situations. It's just the best education. If you did nothing else but read for your education, I recommend it.
I am with you on that. I have to say that I lied, that I did write a book when I was a kid, and it was a Nancy Drew book. And you'll
Oh,
like this because you also are an honoree of the RWA, Romance Writers of America honor book. Is that I made it a romance because I always read romance, and I thought Ned and Nancy need to, get together. So yes, I did write a book. It was no good. And I couldn't have become a writer because it was awful. But I really appreciate that, something like that would have inspired you to go on to doing this thing. So, but those were mysteries. And I read Trixie Belden and all those. What drew you to historical fiction?
Well, I think I knew, or so my favorite author of all time is Agatha Christie. And so when I really started to consider writing more seriously, I knew that I've never been able to figure out one of her Poirots ever. And I felt like the Queen already existed. They didn't need more mystery voices when she did. And so I just thought it's not going to be mystery. But the funny thing is as much of a reader as I was, I knew absolutely nothing about the writing world or writing itself. I'd never taken a writing class. And so I didn't even know when I wrote my first book that historical fiction was a genre. That's how ignorant I was of the world of publishing. I was just loved reading. But I had an idea for a book. My first book, oh, it's way down here in the pile. It's called The Memory of Us. And I had my 4 kids in the car and my iPod shuffle was coming through. And I heard the song Eleanor Rigby, which I had always loved, but it hit me in a new way. And I thought, it was the Beatles song. What if Father Mackenzie and Eleanor knew each other? And what if they had a history? So that became the idea of what I decided I wanted to write. And since the song came out in the 60s, I imagined what age they might have been in the song, and that put more of their youth in the 1930s. And I thought, okay, what was going on in the 1930s? And over in England, it was the beginnings of World War II. So I thought, okay, well, that's where I set it. And so I just set out to write something that was very accurate to the time and the geography and everything. And lo and behold, I was writing historical fiction and didn't really put that together. And it was only, into that process when I looked back at what my own reading history had been. And I realized I've read tons of historical fiction. Apparently, it is a genre and I love it. And now I'm writing in it. So the day that one came out, my agent said, "What's next?" And again, I thought, oh, I never thought about it. What's next? And I had enjoyed the research process so thoroughly. I had enjoyed discovering historical nuggets that I didn't know before. And, I liked it better than textbook reading for history,
Mhm.
that I just loved the process so much that ended up becoming where I took it. So I like to say it found me more than I found it.
I love that sort of accidental historical fiction writer. But I want to go back one step and and ask, was writing something that you knew you were going to do? Was it your livelihood? How did you come to actually being a writer?
Yeah, I took a lot of other steps before that happened. I was an intern and then a staff member in politics in Washington, D.C., which is where I met my husband, and then had a big real estate career when I lived in Texas and
Mhm.
had 4 kids among that time. So when I really started to get that bug to write again, I thought it was going to be something that I would do someday when my 4 kids were older, and I would just read a lot in the meantime. But then my preteens wanted to read Twilight when it came out. And I thought, well, let me screen this. I don't know enough about it if this is going to be okay for them yet. And long story short, over a 3-day weekend, I read all 4 Twilight books. So that might tell you a little bit. Yeah, I was screening it for the kids. But it really took me down a rabbit hole. And I looked into the art of the author, Stephanie Myers, and something that she said was just literally changed my life. I hope to meet her someday and tell her this, but she talked about how she wrote her books at swim team practice for her 3 kids. And it just like broke open to me this. I was like, we're on swim team. I could do that. And somehow that was like permission to me to start thinking about how that could be done. So when that idea for that story the Eleanor Rigby story happened, it was shortly after she just kind of opened up that as a possibility to me. So I had one in diapers. One of them was a newborn, and this story wouldn't leave me alone. And being the good Texas girl I was, I drank Dr. Pepper to caffeinate myself and stayed up till 3 and 4 in the morning writing this book. So I really did write it with a great lack of sleep, which the first draft will definitely reveal and never see the light of day because of that. But it was the spark of a journey that I'm so excited to be on. And I love to give talks now, both to moms and to aspiring writers, to show them, like, you don't have to wait till life is lining up perfectly, because frankly it won't. You
Mhm.
just do it. So I heard one time, you're never going to find the time, you have to make the time. And I made the time. And in my 30s, I made the time by not sleeping. I would have a little more trouble with that now, but that's where I made the time and I made it happen. And that was the sacrifice I did. And here we are.
Well, and it's in, I think you've written what, 7 or 9 books now?
I have 8 books
Eight.
published and 5 in various stages of their process.
Maybe you
I,
shouldn't sleep now either.
yeah, my kids are older though. I only have one essentially left at home now,
Mhm.
so I do have a little more time than I did.
Okay, so now that we have the history, I would love to talk about your most recent book, and then we'll talk a little bit about the others. It's Come Fly with Me,
Mhm.
and it's about, well, you tell us, what is this book about, and where did you get the idea?
All right, Comply With Me is about Pan Am stewardesses in the 1960s. And it is about 2 women from very, very different worlds. One is from small town Pennsylvania who is escaping an abusive marriage, and the other one lives in a penthouse on Park Avenue in her family, but there's also a cage of her own because there's just expectations of what she needs to go through. So both women, for these different reasons, find Pan Am and the ability to become a stewardess and see the world to be their escape from what they feel that they are caged in. So despite their very different backgrounds, they go through training and become friends together. So it's very much found friendship and sisterhood. And one of the threads that kind of got the storyline going early on was learning that in that day and age, you couldn't be married and be a stewardess. So I made this one character married because I liked the idea of kind of making her look over her shoulder the whole time. It created some drama and some tension. So that's the basics of what it's about. There's love, adventure. There's lots of destinations. I've been to 10 of the 12 destinations I wrote about, but it came about quite organically and quite different than my other books. But that's the basics in a nutshell.
So
I'd say
how,
anything you want about it.
okay, well, but how did it come about though? You said it was different from your other books. So what sparked the idea for you?
It's different from my other books in the sense that they all came sparked from a really specific moment or place that I was traveling. So maybe in my travels, like for The Beautiful Strangers, I was at the Hotel del Coronado outside of San Diego. And my husband said, "You love this place. You should write a book about it." So that sparked that book. Or, I can pinpoint it. Comply With Me is different in the sense that it sort of organically is a combination of a lot of my loves. So I love aviation. I've had a lot of pilots in my family. I love Frank Sinatra and that whole era, and I clearly love to travel. So it was more organic with my own personal interests. It came about a little more tangibly as this concept was in mind, because in February 2020 we were in the South Pacific, and just a note on that, we did a month-long cruise that left February 1st, 2020, and we all remember that February and March of 2020 were extremely different months. So February 28th, when we arrived back in the US, the world was different. It was quite a surreal experience. But mid-February found us on the island of Moorea outside of Tahiti. And so I was sitting on that island watching the coconuts bob up and down and the children play in the water. And the idea for the prologue of this thing I'd been just sort of thinking about fell into my head. So if y'all have read the book, you've seen that it starts on the island of Moorea. And I did not have pen, paper, or phone with me. I was sitting there trying to just be in the moment when suddenly inspiration ended up hitting. And so without anything to write on, I realized I had just bought a bottle of lychee liqueur and had a bag. And so I borrowed a pen from somebody and I wrote the prologue on my liquor bag. And so this is the bag, and I even like went into the folds, just like inspiration struck, and there it was. So my humble little beginnings of Come Fly With Me, but it took that organic idea and started to give it shape. And then once I had internet access again, I started taking all the serious steps to meet Pan Am stewardesses, get oral histories, and COVID hit kind of at the right time because all the women I talked to, everybody was homebound. So they were my captives for hours and hours on end as I asked all my questions. And things work out in
Well,
the right timing.
that sounds very misery-like, but okay.
They volunteered. They volunteered. So I'm being dramatic.
As am I, but it's fine. Um, so, have you read the book Fly Girls by Anne Hood?
No, but that one's been recommended to me. I tend to not read historical fiction while I'm writing it. So it's on my list.
Yeah, no, it was it's not historical fiction, it's a memoir, but it sort of
Oh,
reminded me
okay.
of that, like because you did like it, the rules and it wasn't easy to be a stewardess back in
Yeah.
in that day, in that time. And so um, like how did your characters develop? Did the characters develop first, or the plot, or the setting for you?
Well, it's really what kind of writer I am. You may be aware of both plotters and pantsers. And plotters are what most people think of in writers, that they have plotted out what their book is going to be like, and then they set forth. I'm a pantser who writes by the seat of her pants. So
On the bag, I got that.
or in this case, the bag. And I think it's a roundabout way of answering, but that's what my mindset is I write like I'm a reader. So when I'm reading a book, I don't know what happens next. So I write my book as if I'm its own reader. And that's kind of how I like to describe pantsing. So once I had the prologue in mind, then the characters of Judy and Beverly started to take place. And then I thought, okay, now I need to go find the research that makes this very authentic. And so it just kind of is a step by step for me. I didn't know where it was going to end. I did not have a plot in mind. It just chapter by chapter, it developed as if I was its own reader. So I like that because I discover the history as I go, and it allows me to have the freedom to go in whatever direction the story feels like it's going in.
Hmm. And do you write linearly? Like, do you just write and then go back and edit it so that it makes sense?
Yeah, I learned the hard way through writing enough books now. And so again, for any aspiring writers out there, just get to the end. It's going to be messy and awful, and you're never going to want anybody to see your first draft. But I've heard it said that books are not written, they're edited. And I think that that's totally true. You can't edit until you have something to edit. So I just got my way to the end as I do with my books. And then in the editing, that's just as where the magic happens. You start to see the whole landscape of what you've done. You start to see what you might have contradicted yourself on. You start to see where something needs strengthening. You start to see that there's actually things that are connected that you almost didn't do intentionally, but were subconsciously there.
Mhm.
So looking at the landscape of the book is where really I think the meat of it starts to take place.
Mhm.
The other part is just like kind of fun and freewheeling, but not necessarily good.
Very good. I noticed too that all of your books are standalone. You don't do series. So is that so that you don't have to worry about continuity, or it's just that you haven't had the ideas for a second or third book?
No, honestly, it's because I get kind of tired of the story by the time I spend usually years thinking about a concept, a good solid year minimum writing the book, and then you're promoting the book and you're just eat, drinking, sleeping it. And for myself, my creative interests keep, as I travel, I discover new creative interests. And so by the time I put a book to bed and it's out there, I'm kind of done with that book. I still love it and it's still precious and full of memories for me, but I don't necessarily want to revisit it. I have had so many people ask me about Come Fly With Me specifically though, and just the response has just been so beautiful and humbling that what I am going to do, for sure by the end of the year, I'll have one out. I'm going to start writing some Judy and Beverly chapters, just one-off stories about a different location. So like, for example, my husband and I honeymooned in Turkey. So I think my first story will have them set in Istanbul, and
Mhm.
I'll just do like a one-off story. And so I'm going to do that through my newsletter. So if you subscribe to my newsletter, that's going to be my vehicle for just no cost, just a free chapter that kind of still explores it without the commitment to a total additional book, because I'm already on to new ideas.
I will be signing up your newsletter right after this, because I love that idea that as a reader, as you know, you get really attached to characters, and to be able to visit them just a little bit without having a full book is wonderful.
Yeah, I've never done it, but this seems to be the one that a lot of people are asking about. So it's like, because it's an international book, there's kind of endless stories that can be told about different settings. And even since it's been published, as much as I really was quite embedded with a lot of Pan Am stewardesses during the writing of this, I've met even so many more after the fact who have just told me that many more stories. And for a while, I was going, "Wow, I wish I knew that when I wrote the book." And this kind of made me go, "Well, wait, I can write more." So I'm already collecting ideas.
Wonderful. Like I said, I love series, but I also feel I'm one of those people that has to read books in order. So the
Mm,
fact that you just have the one off and I can just read it and move on to the next thing is, I think I would really appreciate that, because a lot of authors are just doing series now and it's hard to like
mhm.
keep up. Um, so what was your favorite story that you heard about Pan Am stewardesses, like real life stuff?
Oh, real life stuff. Well, let's just say I got a lot of celebrity gossip up in my brain now after talking to all the women, because there's not one Pan Am stewardess I've met who didn't have loads of stories of celebrities on their flights. That was like the airline of the day. So I heard everything from like Frank Sinatra and Don Ho and Lucille Ball, and I heard a lot of good things, juicy things sometimes that I chose to not put in there because I felt it was a little gossipy. The good gossip, I don't think I put this in the book, but I'll tell good gossip, is that universally they all loved Sophia Loren. That if Sophia Loren was on your flight, they just said she was gracious, kind, her children were well behaved, and they universally said that she was just even more gorgeous in person. Um, Another story, Frank Sinatra was afraid to fly, and so he was apparently quite a grumpy passenger. Not rude, but he was clearly afraid to fly, and it kind of, came out in his attitude. But they didn't dislike him or anything. But there were a lot. So those things didn't make its way into the book. The things that did make its way into the book, in large part, the training. I found the training so interesting. So when they're doing the water training at the Square Motel in Miami, that's all based on a real motel in Miami that they trained at. I loved learning the story about the landing in Hong Kong and how dangerous and scary that was, and that a stewardess's first time being a part of it would land her in the cockpit for her baptism. So that had to make its way into the book. And then another one that I just loved was learning about Hong Kong being a favorite layover destination. In fact, all the ladies I interviewed, I said, "What was your favorite layover?" And with the exception of one who said Paris, every single person said Hong Kong. And I thought that was so interesting. So when I delved in, they talked about the man who would meet you with the tape measure around his neck, and he would take your measurements and take you to a shop to pick out the fabrics. And over 3 different times of layovers in Hong Kong, he would make you a custom dress for just like nothing. It was so inexpensive. And so they ended up with gorgeous wardrobes,
Mhm.
custom made in Hong Kong. So that was the shopping was a favorite topic of theirs.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, you would never ever think of it. And this is what, not in the 1950s,
Early 60s
early
for,
60s.
mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, you just would never think of it. I've heard about the training, that it could be pretty intense.
Mhm.
I've heard about the misogyny that
Mhm.
people have experienced, and I don't know if if you felt like you wanted, if you heard a lot of stories like that, or if people kind of tried to stay positive.
No, the ladies were really, really honest with me. And the beauty I found, though, and I never ever felt like these were just that they were giving me spin, because a lot of them became good friends of mine. And so I think this was very authentic. Pan Am was different. A lot of the misogyny, both of the era and of the industry, was not coming from Pan Am in large part. For example, there's a lot of lore out there that's just simply not true about like romances between pilots and stewardesses or anybody throwing around their superiority with that. And they roundly denied that that happened. They said, at least in the 60s, the pilots had all been, for the large part, World War II pilots. So at this point, they were married, they had children, they were military trained and disciplined. And they said the pilots were father figures to them. They took care of the stewardesses, especially at layovers, as if they were family. And so that is why, like, for example, a lot of you may remember the Pan Am series that was on for one season 15 years ago. It was wholeheartedly dissed by every Pan Am stewardess I met for its inauthenticity. And many of them went so far as to say they were embarrassed by it. And I was like, wow, I really liked it. I really liked it. But apparently the liberties they took for the sake of television drama were absolutely false from real life.
Mhm.
And so they said they are still, there's thousands of former Pan Am stewardesses around the world who are still part of something called World Wings. And it's because they are taking deep steps to keep the legacy alive. And that's because they didn't feel, in large part, the misogyny of the era. Now, there were passengers taking liberties, and I did touch on that. But as a company, I really loved discovering how classy and supportive Pan Am was. These women sing its praises all the
Wow.
time and spend hours and money continuing to keep the legacy alive because they loved it so much.
Mhm. I was going to say that I've heard that Pan Am, the show, was like the Love Boat of the skies. So definitely some,
Yes.
yeah, liberty there. Barbara asks, were you somewhat aware of the legal battles that occurred described in the PBS documentary before you came up with this idea?
No, I was not aware of stuff like that. I just being an aviation nut and wanting to write this aviation story and seeing that Pan Am just seemed to be like the iconic, legendary one. That's where I really took it in that direction. I will say I kept my research as well to 1962 to 1964.
Mm.
If anything happened in Pan Am before or after that, I had to have blinders on because there's so much history in a company that as of 2027 will be 100 years old that I had to be disciplined or else I would have just be writing an info dump and nobody wants to read an info dump. I got a grant to go to the University of Miami and they have over I think like 3,500 boxes of Pan Am memorabilia. And so even and then, it was very official. I had archival gloves and all the stuff. Even then, my daughter was my research assistant. And I said, if it doesn't say 1962 to 1964, we are not even looking at it.
Oh,
So
that
that's my
must have
long
been so
answer for
difficult.
saying it was because it was really tempting on a lot of fronts, but I knew it was like had to be mission focused. I think that I could make a whole career writing books about Pan Am over the different eras, the different locations. I could make a series, definitely.
Mhm.
And then it could include so many more of the things that are part of its history. But I really did have to be laser focused on this era, or it would have been 800 pages long and
which
never
we
gotten
would have,
published.
which we would have read.
Yeah.
Would have been like
So
a.
people ask me all the time, Pan Am facts. I'm like, if it's not 1962 to 1964, I can't help you.
Well, you could have written The Goldfinch of Pan Am. Is
Yes.
the Goldfinch?
Yes.
Yeah, whatever that book was. So I want to go back to like all of your books because there are different eras, different kinds of stories, different plots and settings. But the one thing that I feel like goes through all of them is that sense of found family and that sense of camaraderie, especially between women.
Mhm.
Is that something that you like early on in your career were like, you know what, I want to I want to highlight that women can support each other and in all of that, or is it kind of like it just happened?
It definitely just happened. Maybe that's the pantser in me. And it was only in looking back in my books that at one point I realized I have a brand. I didn't even realize I had a brand. Those are just things that have been important in my life. I feel like I have so many sisters, friend sisters who have been impactful, who I hope to have been impactful on, that it is just like a natural outspring of my own experience to talk about the friendships of women. I also just think in an era where there's a lot of division, I think there's just so many more opportunities to build each other up, and in ways that I try to make very authentic. I like to put that in my books. The other brand that I realized kind of emerged, I was probably 6 books in before I realized I had a pattern going. That's how much of a pantser I am. I realized I'm writing about women in the mid 20th century, give or take, from like the 30s to the 60s. And when I really thought about it, what I find so interesting about that era is when World War II happened and the men left and the women took their jobs. I really think it was an era where women started to realize the array of capabilities they have more than they had been able to before, and just realize new opportunities. So, over the course of my books, I came to understand that, not intentionally, I kept writing about women who were stepping into new opportunities that those few decades started to do. And there was still a lot of room to go, to grow. But I think that those decades were instrumental in starting to spark a lot of that. I feel like Come Fly With Me is sort of like the crown jewel of that experience. When you have women like literally going all over the world in the 60s, I mean, they were breaking brand new barriers and being pioneers that we definitely hadn't seen before. So this book kind of was the pinnacle, I think, of what ended up becoming a brand.
So was that sixth book? Was that the one with the three women, Gladys, Dottie, I think, the one that I can't remember the title. I'm sorry, but
Until We Meet.
Until We Meet. So that
Yes.
one was about like around World War II, yes, where they Gladys especially is like, oh, I have an opportunity. The guys are all off. I'm going to be my authentic self. Was that the sixth book, or was that sort of like part of the pattern?
That was the 6th book. And it wasn't trying to be a part of anything that had been a pattern. I think I started to realize a pattern was emerging, though. And in that one, I had 3 main characters who were women. And I realized in writing them that they were all taking these different approaches to those new opportunities. So Gladys was all in, she's going to be a career woman, and Dottie was flirting with that because she was working in the at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, but in the end she was really drawn to being at home, being married, and having a child. And then Margaret, who's friends with both of them, was weighing both options. So I felt like I had women on 3 different tracks who were still the closest to friends. So that's probably my book that explores the array of decisions that women were making more than anything else. And then it did kind of dawn on me like, oh, this is just the territory I seem to travel on. Because I believe, like, I mean, I have three of my 4 kids are daughters, and I believe in their talents and the talents of women. And as my I did work, even though I had a career, I worked from home. I homeschooled my kids, actually. So I'm a homeschooling mom. And I saw a lot of other homeschooling moms believing and living as if that was their only identity. And that was fine if that is, and it's what they wanted. But I saw talents and skills in them that I don't think they were realizing in themselves. And that's a lot of talks I've given were to moms and homeschooling moms, where it's like, this is the most important thing we're doing. I agree, but gosh, you have so many gifts. Like, there's a lot to explore in what women are capable of. So I like pulling that out of people, and have a belief in what women can do.
Well, I think that's really wonderful too, because you're highlighting not the stereotypes. You're highlighting the fact that women did have opportunities and they jumped on them.
Mhm.
They didn't just like wait for them to come to them, or, you know, just be the stereotypical, Judy Cleaver or whatever her name was,
Mhm.
that they're June Cleaver, which is fine.
Mhm.
But like, you're
Mhm.
also saying it's fine to be a stay-at-home mother, but you're also saying it's okay to jump onto these opportunities.
Exactly. I think there's a menu of things that women are capable of. I think we're really, really multifaceted, and so I love exploring that. And it is authentic. I think that sometimes it can be really easy to take eras like that and just talk about the opportunities women didn't have. Like in none of my books could women get credit cards and things. I know that didn't come about, I think, till the 70s, but we tend to focus on what we couldn't do rather than what women were doing. And all but one of my books are about fictional women, but they are very much inspired by real circumstances where women were just, they were killing it. They were doing a great job. And I like to, my nickname's Pollyanna. It was an early book I loved, but I do love to explore how much very good there was,
Mhm.
despite obstacles, women who were being fearless and fierce and brave and all of that.
Well, I mean, I think that gives it more, I don't know, oomph, is that they're doing it despite challenges and over obstacles. They're not there. They're just doing it instead, in spite of it.
Don't we do that anyways, women? I think it's part of our DNA, to be
Every
honest.
day.
We are overcoming so many obstacles. There were a lot of exterior obstacles there, but they were doing it. I think we're made of strong stuff.
Yeah.
So I like
But at
to
the same
hold it like
time,
that.
you're not minimizing the male characters. Like
Mhm.
they're fully fleshed out as well. They're not just like
Mhm.
these two-dimensional bad guys who don't want to, their
Mhm.
women to do anything, which I think is wonderful too, because that's how real life is.
Yeah. I it's also kind of part of, I think there's a lot of guys that get a bad rap. There's guys who get a bad rap for really good reason, but I think there's a lot of good guys in there. I'm married to one. My son is just a really, really good guy. I believe they're out there. And so my romantic leads almost always are good guys. I do try to make them three-dimensional. They're not perfect or cardboard, I hope, but they are good guys. I like to celebrate the best that were in men who were supporting their women at the time too, and I think there were plenty who were doing it.
I think so too. Otherwise, we'd all be dead.
That's
Um,
right.
all right, I'm going to get to some of these questions. Teresa asks, as you write and release the shorter stories based off the characters from Comply With Me, will you stay within the 1962 to 64 timeframe, or will you expand on that?
As of right now, the ideas that I'm having with Judy and Beverly are going to stay in that 1962 to 1964 for reasons that are obvious if you've read the book. So I will stay in that time period for them. There are other time periods that I am exploring. For example, it was just I think the 50th anniversary of Operation Baby Drop, where
Mm-hmm.
Pan Am was a really important part of helping a lot of the Vietnamese children escape during the war. And Pan Am was a super huge part of that happening. And I met a lot of women who were part of that and describe the machine guns that were firing at them as they're taking off and stuff like that. So I think I may still take some of the characters from the books and may have some short stories that highlight different parts of history, but it's still going to be mostly relegated to that decade, probably, to be able to keep it with the same characters.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see. There's again thousands of stories that could be told about Pan Am.
Thomas asks, any idea how such an iconic brand, Pan Am, eventually crashed and burned corporately, not aeronautically?
Yes. Well, yes and no. I'm aware that it did, but since it didn't fit into the 1962 to 1964 timeline, I really kept those blinders on from going down that path too much. I did in my friendships, many friendships I've made with them, meet many people who were there who were part of those last days. I don't know all the ins and outs, although one of the people I met and befriended was like the main Pan Am lawyer as that was all closing down. So maybe I'll explore that someday, but it was in the early 90s. And so it was pretty much outside of this. But one fun story I did learn about that real quick is I met somebody who had been a steward on the very last flight of, I think it was somewhere in California. It might have been LAX or SFO. Nobody knew Pan Am was going to close. Nobody. It just closed very immediately. The staff didn't know or anything. So he was a purser. And so he was collecting all the cash for the drinks and everything like that. And he goes into the office as part of his job to go turn all the cash from the flight, and the office is closed. and there was nobody to give the cash to, and he kept trying, but literally nobody was there. It was done. And so I said, what did you do with the cash? And he said, I paid my rent. So yeah, it was that abrupt, but I don't know all the politics and economics of what necessarily brought it to that. It is being talked about being resurrected. There was just a flight that happened in late June where for the cheap price of $65,000, you could go on a plane that was retrofit to, it was 100-ish first class seats. It was branded Pan Am. They had Pan Am stewardesses, and there's somebody who has bought the brand who is toying with launching it. At the moment, it's going to be these really special flights. There's one coming up in April that will be only $94,000 a person. It's trans-Pacific. But he's kind of toying with the idea of even like just truly bringing the brand back. So we'll see.
Maybe. Um, I have to ask because I'm just super curious. It's like, what were some of the rules for the women stewardesses? I know there was a height requirement, but you also had mentioned at some point, maybe before we started, that they couldn't be married.
Yes. Yeah, so in the early 60s, that was definitely the case. They couldn't be married, they couldn't have children, and they couldn't be caregivers for like elderly parents. You had to be completely unattached because they needed to know, like, if they called you up and needed you on a flight, you had to be able to just pick up and go. And
Mhm.
so you were not allowed to be married. And if you got married, you had to leave. So back in that era, the career span of a stewardess was about 18 months because so many of them did get married. And as much as there was not romance between the pilots and the stewardesses, there was tons of romance between the passengers and the stewardesses. And as you kind of think about it, it was sort of like a pre-vetting thing at the time. I mean, airfare, I think we'll all kind of still say is expensive, but it was sort of expensive as to still be somewhat of a luxury. And also, these women were college educated. So, sort of the businessmen who were traveling were at a certain level, and the women had been vetted. So, it was not really surprising that a lot of romance came out of that. I was at a party in Huntington Beach in March where 40 Pan Am stewardesses threw me a party for the book. And somebody asked the question within there, how many of you married passengers? And about half of them raised their hands. So
Wow.
that was neat. But they did have to leave. Also, I learned, it's not what you asked, but it's kind of adjacent, I think, is it was 1962, so it's civil rights. And I like to write my historical fiction accurately reflecting the era. And so I did learn that on Pan Am and most airlines, that Black stewardesses didn't come about until the late 60s. I think it was 1969 for Pan Am. And so 1962 is clearly way before that. But I thought, how do I illuminate what was really going on in the era without, I didn't want to fake something that wasn't there either. And that's where I came up with the character of Ronell, so that I could bring up and illuminate what was happening in 1962 and the discrepancies within there. And so she becomes the friend early on that allows me to kind of touch on, hey, this was happening and it was an injustice, but I don't want to ignore it either.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think the yearbooks are entertaining and interesting and well researched and all that. They have. Do you feel like they do illuminate things that you want to tell about that era? The different eras that you write about. Do you have like a specific thing that comes up and you're like, oh, I want to make sure I get that in somehow?
I usually discover that. Sorry, my dog's being loud in the background. I'm going to
Oh,
let her out.
my cat's. That's right. My cat's all over me, as you all noticed.
Yeah. That's okay. My husband's cooking, so food always, she loves me, but food will win. um, I don't set in with I don't have an agenda to do anything but be authentic.
Hmm.
So I don't try to come in with any of my own views or images of anything. I try to really, really make it authentic to what was true and not just what we believe to be true. So that's like a sort of generic goal that I have, but I don't go in with a goal of I'm going to make sure this thing gets illuminated because it's part of like something coming from me that wants to illuminate it. I love this. To me, the heart is the characters, the found friendship. I really love what we call agape love, which is a self-sacrificial love. So as much as I have romantic love in my books, I love people who are giving of themselves and sacrificing of themselves. And there's a lot of those characters in my book. So it starts there. And then everything else, I just try to build the authentic world.
Hmm. Donna wants to know, who are your favorite women authors?
Well, Agatha Christie being the all-time favorite. My favorite living author is Kate Morton. She's got, I think, 6 books out now.
Mhm.
Definitely favorite historical fiction author. And her books are just so sumptuous. Like her word choices are beautiful. You just feel like you're feasting on a banquet when you read her books. And I mean, they're compelling stories, but her language choice is just so, so beautiful. I just aspire to that. I love also for historical fiction, I absolutely love Marie Benedict, who writes almost exclusively about real life women, where she's illuminating their stories. And I think she does it in just completely a compelling way. So I feel like I learn a lot from Marie Benedict's books. And then on a contemporary front, I will auto buy anything from Sophie Kinsella because those are just so much fun. And Catherine Center is a pretty recent favorite. I love Catherine Center,
Oh my
definitely an
God.
auto buy. So those are, yeah, those are the ones that immediately come to mind.
I love Catherine Center. I almost met her a couple weeks ago. I wasn't able to at the Love Struck Books in Cambridge, but she just seems like just a hoot.
Yeah.
Teresa would like to know, what is your favorite Agatha Christie book?
Death on the Nile. I love it. I went to Egypt in 1996 and I got to go to Aswan, to the hotel at Aswan, which is where she wrote the book. And I got to sit on the patio overlooking the Nile where she wrote the book. And I just thought, oh my gosh, that was like the closest I could come to fangirling Agatha Christie was sitting where she sat when she wrote my favorite Agatha Christie book. I think the mystery of it is so good, but the setting, I mean, just wow, Egypt, you get any more legendary than that. So yeah, that's my overall. I think I cut my teeth though on The Man in the Brown Suit because there was a TV movie out when I was much younger with like Rue McClanahan and Stephanie Zimbalist, and I just loved the movie. So that I think that probably got me into Agatha Christie, The Man in the Brown Suit.
So nobody asked me, but I loved And Then There Were None and
Mm.
The Body in the Library. I think those were my two
Mm.
favorites.
Oh,
Just
good ones, good ones.
yeah, because you can't figure it out. You just that last page, you're like, oh, no way.
But they're all there. Like when Poirot, or when it's something, they're not all Poirot, but when it gets illuminated, you realize she told you all along the way where the clues were.
Yeah.
And yet she did it so expertly that you don't realize it. But she doesn't just pull a rug out and just like have something fall out of the sky that you never could have figured out. I feel a little bit like an idiot every time I was like, it was right there, but I still never solved it. And my son just got his reading list for school this year, and then there were none on it. And I was like, I love this teacher. Anybody's gonna sign, and then there were none. You are so good in my book.
That's fabulous. I actually have a program, I think next week, with an author who wrote a book called B is for Venom. It's all about the poisons that Agatha Christie uses in her books.
Ooh,
I
nice,
know, right? I
nice.
didn't realize it was so prevalent in her books, but yeah, she has like a bunch of them. Um, so I have actually, because you have the honor book with RWA as well as the historical fictions, um, is there a reason that you went more towards historical fiction than romance?
Just I fell in love with the research when I wrote The Memory of Us. That was the one inspired by the Beatles song. I wanted to set it in Liverpool, but I'd never been to Liverpool before, and I'd never lived in 1938 before. So I just working so hard to make both the geography and the time period authentic is a process that I totally fell in love with. And all of my books do have romance in them, but I like it being the story of the woman primarily. They all have romantic elements because I think romance is wonderful, but they are going to be fundamentally about the woman and her journey. However, I am writing a rom-com right now, a modern day rom-com, just because when I'm writing historical, I can't read historical. So romantic comedy, romances have been where I've been turning a lot, and it got the wheels turning, and I'm like 8 chapters in and having a totally fun time with it. So we'll see. I think my agent's gonna like it. She represents a whole lot of romance, so I feel like when I finish it, it could go places.
Fabulous. I love hearing that authors don't, just because you've done it and it's been successful, it doesn't keep you in that box, that you're.
Yeah. I think we're seeing that more than we did, especially with social media, because even once I was like maybe 3 books in, I started to have some different ideas. And that's when my agent was talking about branding, and she was even recommending that if I change genres, I should have a different name. I think that was really kind of big for a while. And I'm really glad that I didn't take the turn at the time, because I think now with social media and the fact that authors are just so completely accessible, I feel like if I had a different name, I'd have to have a whole new social media presence to be that person out there. And I think writers will follow you. I know as a reader, I will follow any writer I love. Like if Kate Morton wrote the next phone book, I'm like, sign me up. I'm buying it on release day. So I, yeah, I think people will follow me who like my writing. I think they'll follow me to a rom-com. So I think in this era, thanks to social media, we could do that.
Absolutely. So now you said you have five books in the works. And you mentioned
Yes.
a rom-com. I don't know.
Mhm.
Can you talk about the others?
Yeah, one is co-written with a producer who wrote a script and brought me on to write the book. So as she moves toward producing that, her goal would be that the book and the movie would come out at the same time. So it was a real different way to do it. Usually you see book to film, and this is kind of film to book, but we're essentially done with that other than some edits. It just now is kind of sitting there until that other side of things happens. So that's almost done. I'm co-writing a contemporary book with one of the Pan Am stewardesses I met, who had a medical malpractice odyssey in real life and was telling me about it. And in casual conversation, we're like, what if we return that into a book, a fiction book? We're going to fictionalize it. And so we meet once a week on Zoom to work that out. We're about 10 chapters in. I have 2 historicals started that we're about to go pitch to my publisher. I'm kind of hoping for a 2 book deal on that. And then the rom-com is just my fun project. So I've never had this many at once, and they're all different enough and at different stages that it's not as confusing as it sounds. And we'll see which one happens first.
Well, I think that Come Fly With Me should be a show so that we can get over the original Pan Am series.
Yes, I am in talks with the producers who has said she wants to option it. So there's a long way to go from that to it happening, but that is further than I've been with the book before. So it's pretty exciting to even have those conversations. That would be great.
Mhm.
That would I'd love to. Um, I would love to bring something to screen that the Pan Am stewardesses will love. They love the book. They have been super supportive of the book.
That's
So
amazing.
that would be really cool.
Did you have any of them read the book before it came out? So, like, as like ARC readers or anything like that?
Only one, the woman who's the president of World Wings, just because I wanted to make sure that it was honoring them and was authentic. And so I definitely had her read it first, because I fell in love with these women so thoroughly, and I care about authenticity anyway, but I would have happily changed something if it wasn't passing muster. And on that front, I will mention real quick. So once I came back from War Aurea and knew this was going to be a Pan Am book, I did a Google search on how to find Pan Am stewardesses and talk to them and get oral histories. And that's where I found World Wings, which is this, thousands of them around the world who keep the legacy alive. And I kind of thought, with all the books I had under my belt, that there'd be a pretty good welcome to, oh, now I want to address this. And um, there was definitely gatekeeping in the best way possible, which I've come to understand. And in hindsight, they showed me that so many people have approached them with what they call mattress romps because of what the perception was.
Hmm.
And so before they would open the gates to me, they went and read my previous books. They wanted to see what my style and my approach was. And they came out and they said, you write classy, and that's who we are. You get to do it. And they threw open the gates. And as far as I know, I'm the only fiction writer that has been able to do so. But I think it's because I cared about that authenticity. So if it were to ever become a movie, and I don't know what all the ins and outs of that are, I would write into a contract that I had to have some say over it, because I would not want it to be something that they weren't proud of. And I would rather not do it than it not be right.
Hmm. That's amazing. I think it's nice to know that you pass muster.
Yes, definitely. And now I'm in. They tell me you're part of the Pan Am family. They've had me out as their keynote at their convention. They've said that this book is going to bring it into the next generation. So they have just absolutely gone full in on it, which is just so nice.
Wow. Has there been any other book that you've written that you have found a community like that?
Not to that level because it's such a global community. So that has been really great. As I'm looking them over, the first Emma is my fifth book, and that has really been embraced by the San Antonio community because it's about a real life woman. And I'm fourth generation San Antonio. Um, people who people who come to San Antonio often find the book. There's a bookstore that carries it regularly, and they said they're always selling out of it. But in a nutshell, what's so interesting about the book is a woman named Emma was married in the early 1900s to a man who was a beer tycoon, and she was injured in a car accident, and so he hired two nurses to take care of her, both of whom were also named Emma. He had affairs with both Emmas. So he had wife Emma and two mistresses Emma. And in 1914, one of the Emmas murdered him in what became crime of the century. It was international headlines. So Emma, the wife, who was in a wheelchair, ended up taking over the beer empire, running it more successfully and more profitably than he had. Again, in an era where women were not in business like this, and then successfully navigated it through Prohibition and was the only large brewery in the South that didn't lose any employees through the process of Prohibition. And then midnight, when Prohibition ended, at midnight, she had trucks going right back out. So she's just a remarkable, but like almost completely lost to history person. And so I have made a lot of beautiful relationships in San Antonio that sprung from the book and from illuminating a local hero like that.
Um, did they find out which Emma killed him?
Yes, it wasn't a mystery who killed him, but it she did go on trial, and I found articles from all over the world that followed the trial, and this is something fun you guys might know. So if you love Chanel Cleaton, if you love historical fiction, you might be familiar with Chanel's works. Well, at one point in time, Chanel and I lived in the same town. And so we used to go right across from each other in Panera. And so I always had this memory when I was writing the first Emma, I was sitting across the table from Chanel Cleaton in Panera. And this is before Reese Witherspoon picked her up and everything. And I had this just obstacle in the book I couldn't get over, which is how do I write a book with three Emmas that doesn't get confusing to readers? And that was the moment where I had the inspiration that the whole book was essentially going to be about the wife Emma, but I would take real life newspaper articles about the trial of the other Emma, of which the third Emma was also a part because she was present when the other Emma killed her. And so after every chapter, I have a newspaper article that follows the trial. And that way it takes the reader just out of the story to be like, this is distinct and separate, but I'm also not losing the thread of what happened with those two Emmas either. And so that came to me while writing with Chanel. And I was just kind of think about, I love writing across from somebody where you're just, it's like writerly air. It sort of just sparks inspiration and helps you through roadblocks like that.
Did you guys like brainstorm it, or did it come to you and you were like, I've got it, Chanel?
No, we used to meet and like just catch up for like half an hour and then we were just doing our own writing. So it wasn't collaborative on that front, but just something about being across from other writers. And this has happened with other writer friends too. Just kind of sparks something. You're just it elevates your thought process, I think, when you're not sitting by yourself, you're sitting with somebody who just knows knows the process, even if you're not talking about it.
Mhm. I love Thomas's comment. A woman who successfully took over for a man and was ignored by history. What else is new?
Yes, it was out there. 1914 was not exactly the era where women were stepping into new opportunities. So that one was a little bit of a one-off being early 20th century for me, but it was too good a true story to not illuminate her
Oh, it
amazingness.
sounds fascinating. Barbara has the one last question about books to movies. We know that Come Fly With Me is optioned. We know that your next book, which is not out, is being produced. Is there any other of your books that you think would make the perfect movie or TV show?
Yeah, I think that that first one, The Memory of Us, and I've heard historical's so hard because the budgets for them are so big. So I pulled this one out. This is the one that was inspired by Eleanor Rigby. The names had to change, which is a whole other long story. But it's essentially, if you know the song and you read the book, you totally see where it is. But it is my tearjerker book. And I like one of my favorite books of all time is Jane Eyre because it's bittersweet and not everything always gets wrapped up in a perfect bow. And we already know Eleanor dies in the end because that's what the song is about. So that's not a surprise. But how it comes about and what happens, I love journeying with that. I think it could be really beautiful on stage or screen. And I will just say the other one that I've talked to somebody about before is The Beautiful Strangers, and that's the one set at the Hotel del Coronado
Mhm.
on the set of Some Like It Hot. So I think that would be a super fun movie because it's got Marilyn Monroe, Jack Lemmon, Tony Curtis. It's beachy. It was my most fun book to write, and I think it would be really, really fun on screen. But I will say quickly, I got an email from somebody early this year who had read my third book, The Way of Beauty. It's set in New York City around the building of Penn Station. And
Mhm.
he wrote to tell me he'd written a musical based on it and sent me the libretto, sent me the score. He had had musical friends sing it. And I got to listen to my book being done as a musical. And so I worked with my agent. We're finding some ways that if he wants to take it further, there'll be a green light from, I don't know what will happen with it, but oh my gosh.
Right.
I don't know any other writers who've been told I wrote a musical, a full length musical about your book. That was really awesome.
Well, as somebody who I read in your bio breaks out into song at any moment, you must have
Yes.
loved that.
I totally love that. And there were songs that were sticking in my head for a while. I was like, oh, that's really cool. And there were things I had feedback on that he was super receptive to. So it was very neat. I don't know what will happen with that. But yeah, I honestly to see one of my books turned into a musical would almost even be a bigger dream because that's awesome. Theater loving me would love that.
I would go see that for sure. So thank you so much, Camille. This has been fascinating. I mean, not just about the books, but the research and your own connections with the people that you write about. It's just, you're amazing.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And I love keeping in touch. I'm on Instagram and TikTok very regularly. So I easily will, you can keep in touch with me that way or ask me questions. And then if you're interested in the short stories I will be working on, my newsletter is just the sign up for my newsletter is found on my website, which is
Mhm.
camilledimioauthor.com. And I really only send a newsletter a couple times a year. So you were just not going to have an inbox full of my stuff, but that will be my vehicle for those things. So keep in touch.
Okay, I will, because I love that. I'm going to definitely sign up as soon as, like I said, this is over. Thank you all for your questions and your, listening in on this. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening.
All right. You too. Nice to meet you all.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.